Alrighty, so let's talk about Roach beats. So when listening to Blood Machine today in the morning, I noticed several things about it. So number one, all the beats seem to be very high tempo. So um, another thing about them is that they seem to be high resolution. So between the snare, like the kick and the snare, you have a barrage of hi-hats and things happening. So if I'm thinking like on a grid, that means that I'll have like a lot of positions in between. And then another thing is that I noticed that really this barrage of hi-hats is made more interesting through an application of just heavy amount of phaser and flange effects. So I decided, hey, I'm gonna do that. There was one other thing that I discovered that made a huge difference in the overall mixing and sound. But okay, so this is the beat 7 that we were looking at that I showed you before. So this is what it is. Let's go through the elements first, and I'll show you what I applied to what. So this is the kind of the bass drum, right? You were asking like, what is the snare and the kick here? So this becomes clearer in the context of like all the hi hats because this is what you have. So you just add that. And really like so the hi-hats the bass drum is relatively simple. You also have this bit here, but again, like if you listen to these things, so there's nothing really difficult here, but the important bit is that C is like 170 BPM, which means that you can do a lot here. But anyway, like this is something that you could do fairly easily. The good bit is that I've used these kind of big percussion drums. I have like samples that sound very good, and so this is what it is. Now, the hi hats I think are the important bit. This is what gives like this kind of Roach feeling. So this is what they are. I randomized the notes so that they're playing different things, and that way they don't sound monotonous, right? And then together you have this kind of weird thing. Okay, but the important bit, of course, are the effects. So the effects that I have on the bass drum and like those, the snare and the kick, nothing. So nothing here. This is what I have for the hi hats. So there are two hi hats, like two separate things here, uh, and it's mostly phaser. It's like phaser flange effect, right, from Valhalla. Then I have on one of the hi hats, I have a gross beat, which is basically volume automation. Honestly, I could have made it just as automation. I just did it because on Blood Machine, I heard that the hi-hats were done in a way where like it felt like it had a very tight volume envelope. As I thought, let me try it this way. Then I have the delay. I just played around so that it's fairly interesting. I noticed that if I add like higher values here, then it's a little less apparent that it's a delay, and it instead plays around like it begins mixing with the pattern itself. But again, nothing really special here. And then here, it's a tighter. It's like sort of the shaker bit, number 3 here. C number 3. And because it's a tighter sort of line, like it's a sequence of just like that, I had to add fairly heavy processing. So a filter, which just does, like, gives it a little squeak, a little bit of cleanup here. Oh, sorry. Then the gross beat does nothing. So nothing. And then a bunch of, the delay, I just chose some preset, and then again a phaser flanger effect, which kind of gives you a bit of movement so that it doesn't. So the flange effect and the different notes give you this the sense of movement and that it's more like a shaker as opposed to just a series of notes. But then it feels very busy, right? Together. And then yeah, so when you hear the whole thing, it sounds pretty good. But that's not the only thing. There's another secret that now I realize is like, I don't know if it's a secret or not, but it's a very cool thing. And that is I'm putting flanger right on the master bus. So let's go to the master bus. First of all, if I turn it on, this is what you get. Notice the huge difference in the sound. Just like, right? Okay, so what's happening? What's going on here? So apart from this, uh, like apart from the modulator right here, which is like a phaser flanger effect, I typically have a patcher. This is mid-side processing. This is mid-side, and I remove some of the lows here. This is mid-side, and I remove a lot of lows here, and it gives huge transparency to the mix. You can even hear this difference, so let me show you. It's incredible. It's just such a small thing, but the difference is huge. Okay, then yeah, the limiter obviously, like I'm just compressing this a little bit. In this case, not even compressing it, but that's fine because the main compressor is here. This is Maximus, which is FL Studio's mastering suite. I typically choose one of the presets, kind of standard mastering presets, right? But I also choose a flanger here. So what's happening here? A little bit of feedback, quite a bit of depth, quite a bit of rate, and 100% of mix. And so what that gives you is that gives you this huge volume, and at the same time, I feel like a flange effect and phaser effects are sort of like blur for images. That's the same thing for audio. It's like it's like blurring out the audio, and it's blurring out the lower frequencies, and all of them honestly, like they all begin to seem to sound very, very nice, very smooth. You're sort of breaking the rule that should put you like should put everything into the middle in terms of like lows, but at the same time, because the patcher does do that job pretty well right now, I think this works very well. And remember, this is not a finished track. After we do all of that, we then render it into a sample. And so now if we go to the actual track, so okay, so this is the track. Yeah, so I had like a couple of versions of the beat where I fixed some levels and whatnot. So here's what we have. This is the beat, right? And right now it is uh, like I just exported it, and obviously you have also all of these like the patcher, the Maximus. They're also here on the master bus, but I also added like a bit of cleanup because the hi-hats were a little bit too loud, and then a little bit of a limiter, but the important bit is I added another phaser effect. And so this is what you can hear. Okay, so it's pretty loud. Actually, it would be less loud if I would turn this thing off because of course it will compress and maximize any amount of signal. So this is because once you turn everything on, like all of these, you switch them on, obviously the whole compression will make the drums less loud actually. But yeah, and so then the rest is just your normal pads, pretty lazy actually, sent through sent through shimmer and all that. But that's the thing. I think the discovery that Steve Roach did like made when he was looking at all of that, like making such beats, was that this really high pace, busy beat sound like it works really well against really calm, almost serene pads. I mean, in this case, I actually obfuscated part of the energy of the beat by adding this by adding this ARP, the sequence. It actually obfuscates a lot of the details in the beat because it basically is the same barrage of notes that the hi-hats and the beat are. So you can't actually hear a lot of the beat because of that. And this is again the same idea. So I have SOAR right here. It's just a normal, like your normal ARP, nothing special here. What I'm applying to it is again phaser, delay, and like that's it. And then I'm feeding it into another channel and then applying more of the same, like more delay, more reverb, and just seeing how this works out. And so there you go. That's how it's done. And if you look at it, see that's the long delay. So I started using this long delay now. I haven't done that previously. Now I'm doing that. So here's another beat that I made. Absolutely same idea. That's like one of the ways, like one of the things that I'm trying to do when I'm trying to understand how something is done is to make sure. Oh my God, I think it's going to crash right now. So I'll have to restart it. But basically, whenever I'm trying to work on a lot of these beats and finding ways to kind of like to produce that, my goal is of course to also create a process that is going to be like reproducible, right? I want to make sure that it's actually scalable, that I can do it again and again and again. And this is why. One moment, let me quickly connect the boom. And this is why it was important for me today to make another track which is going to have the same sound because I wanted to make sure that I can do it again and that it's working, that it's not just a one-off thing. So okay, so in this case, slightly different beat, right? It's 140, but you can make it 170 and it's going to be the same thing as before. It also works great, right? But let's say I specifically wanted to see, will this kind of rhythm work? But you can see that this is the same idea. This is the same idea. What's going on? There you go. So you have this. It's like it sounds even a little comical when you listen to it like this. And then you have obviously the hi-hat pattern. And all of this is randomized. So basically what I do is I say randomize, and then I just do this like, yep, sounds good, fine, accept. Because it's not that important. The important bit is that like the important bit is that it's close enough in terms of like notes that it's not spread too wide, because if it's spread too wide, the higher hi hats you just won't hear them, so they have to be at exactly like about the same volume. And then the way it's done, it's not going to be heard very well anyway against the beat. It's just going to be one of the elements. And so the same thing here. This time, I think, did I apply something? Nope, I didn't apply anything to the bass drum. Again, it's like various same beat here. I just used the same template really. I added some delays here. Yeah, so like, yeah, okay, I separated the bass drum, like the main kick. So you can like do a lot of these things, and then again, I'm applying the same sort of modulation over here, flanger, exporting this, and then in the main track, I'm just using the loop, and then I'm applying things to the loop again. And this is where you can add a lot of, obviously, like a lot of things here. So drums, which uh, apply a flange effect right over here. Yeah, there you go. So it's applying the flange effect over here, but it also sends it into the second channel. Uh, and in this channel, it has a delay. It crashed again. I mean, that's your reality working under wine. Sometimes, if you're switching, especially like in real time and like doing things, sometimes it can crash. But basically, it sends it to another channel, and there I'm using Valhalla delay to basically drop it 12 tones, like an octave down. and it adds kind of a really cool kind of. But that's the thing. Once I have this method, I can now play around with it and produce effects that sound wild, but I'm not really doing that much, right? Because now it's a system and I can do whatever I want, kind of. Having limited my options, I can sort of now do what I want. Anyway, I hope this was useful. This is very cool. These several days, like looking into those fractal grooves, like I don't know if this is the same thing that Roach is doing. Have no idea, but it sure sounds great. And even if that's not what they're doing, I have definitely raised my bar for. And like I think in terms of my thinking here, it all comes down to just taking the beat or taking your percussion seriously in a sense that you don't want it to be like just some relatively bland and uninteresting beat or something like that. You really are trying to make it more interesting. And this is the focus that I never really had. And right now I'm like, okay, I want this element to be really cool, especially now that I know how to make pads relatively quickly. And a lot of them, like I think in these tracks also the beat is actually the important part. Like the pads are sort of important, of course, but they are kind of as a like they're a given here. The important bit is how it works together with the groove. So